was killed with multiple stab wounds. Victim J. Sebring was killed by multiple stab wounds. On August 10th, 1969, the prisoner drove his crime partners to a location near the residence of victim Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. The prisoner entered the LaBianca home alone at gunpoint and tied up the victims. He impressed them with the statement that they would not be harmed and that a robbery was taking place. He then returned to the vehicle containing his crime partners and directed them to enter the residence and kill the occupants. He informed them not to notify the victims that they would be killed. Crime partner Charles Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten then entered the residence, and the prisoner drove away from the scene. The crime partners entered the residence and in a callous manner killed Lino LaBianca by inflicting multiple stab wounds to his neck and abdomen. Rosemary LaBianca was killed by multiple stab wounds which were inflicted to the neck and trunk. The crime partners carved the word war on Lino LaBianca's stomach with the use of a carving fork. At both of the above murder scenes, the prisoner's crime partners used blood of their victims to write the words. Under case number A267861, the prisoner was received into the institution on December 13, 1971, for violation of first-degree murder concurrent with prior term. A pistol, knives, and swords were used in the following crimes which the prisoner committed with crime partners Birolsia, how do you pronounce that one? Beausoleil, Ann Atkins, and Grogan and Davis. The prisoner directed the crime partners to go to the home of victim Gary Allen Hinman and have him sign over his property. The crime partners followed the prisoner's directions, and on July 26, 1969, they contacted the prisoner from the Hinman residence. The prisoner and Davis then went to the Hinman home, and the prisoner struck Hinman with a sword, severing a part of the right ear and causing a laceration to the left side of the face. From his ear to his mouth, the prisoner and Davis then drove away from the crime scene in Hinman's Fiat automobile. On July 27, 1969, after suffering 3 days of torturous treatment, Hinman was killed by a stab wound through the heart, which was inflicted by Beausoleil. When Hinman was found in the Topanga Canyon home on July 31, 1969, he had been stabbed through the heart, in addition to suffering a stab wound in the chest, a gash on the top of his head, a gash behind the right ear, and a laceration on the left side of his face, which cut his ear and cheek. This concludes the reading of the incident offense. Do you have any additions or corrections, Mr. Manson, to that?
I'd like to know who signed that, who put their name on it.
Well, nobody put their name on. This was a hearing conducted in 1982, your hearing that was conducted at that particular time, and that's a reading of the incident offense is taken from the probation office's report at the time of the trial that you had. Do you have any corrections or additions to that?
Well, we can correct the whole thing, because it's basically a hearsay.
Okay, do you remember what I said at the beginning of the hearing? Yeah. I said that we accept as true the court findings in the case. The fact that you were found guilty and you are guilty of those particular murders. If there's any change or anything you want to say about...
So all of that is reality to you?
Yes. Yes, we accept as true.
And either if it never happened, it's still reality to you?
Yes, because you were found guilty by a court of law.
Okay. And all the things that in that courtroom, that went through that courtroom, is reality to you?
Yes. We accept as true.
Now, let me just say one thing.
Okay.
9 black Muslims and 3 Mexicans signed a writ that said I was Jesus Christ. Is that reality to you?
I didn't read that in the report.
It's in the record. I mean, you know.
We have your C file, and all the reports are made available to us. Okay. And I think we know most of it, but that's a reason for the hearing, Mr. Manson, that you can bring these things out if you wish.
I think if you'll look in your own mind, for every point, there's a counterpoint. For every red, there's a black. For every black, there's a red. In other words, what you're making me into in your reports so that you can write your books and do your Rambo trips and make your movies for public entertainment is not really what happened. And what happened could have been explained, but if you will allow me to call a witness.
No. We do not allow witnesses in here.
I mean, it's within a panel. I'd like to question that man in front of the panel.
We do not allow that, Mr. Manson. We have a procedure that we follow. Now, if you want to tell about the crime, then go ahead and tell about the crime. Otherwise,
I will say it, and then if it isn't true, he can interrupt it through you, and then we can talk through you. Is that legal?
You may.
It says here that I can call witnesses on this paper here.
No.
This says I got these rights to do that.
No, you do not. If you would please respond to either any additions or corrections to the incident of offense that I just read.
Yeah, I didn't tie anybody up.
Okay.
I was never on the scene when anyone was killed. I think the law says you can only keep me 17 years or 18 years if I was never on the scene when anyone was killed. I was never on the crime scene of anything. The closest I came to the crime scene is I cut Hinman's ear off in a fight over some money because the Frenchman, he wouldn't pay the Frenchman, and I told him, why don't he be a man about himself and pay his debts? And we had a fight. So in order to hook me up to that, they say, well, they tortured the dude 3 days. I was gone from that scene of that crime for 3 days. I was never on the scene of any crime. I never told anyone directly to go anywhere and do anything. I always said, and mostly it came from the witness stand, I said, like, you know what to do. You have a brain of your own. Don't ask me what to do. I just got out of prison. I don't know what's going on out here. I haven't been out of jail long enough to really get a perspective of what was happening. I just was released from McNeil Island, and I was in Mexico City prison before that, and I was in Terminal Island before that. So I really wasn't up on the 60s as much as you all make me out to be. I had just got out of prison. Most of those people, like Castavian, I knew her 2 weeks. I had seen her 2 or 3 times around the ranch. I had never even been with the broad man that much, you know. People came around me because I played a lot of music, and I was fairly free and open because I really didn't know, honestly. Everyone says that I was the leader of those people, but I was actually a follower of the children because, like, I never grew up. I've been in jail most of this time, so I stayed in the minds of the children. And I'm pretty much a street person, so violence is no new thing to me. And people getting hurt around me is no new thing. I've lived in prison all my life. That happens all the time. I've always walked on a line in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, all across this country, Cook County Jail, Chicago. It's always about fighting. That's part of everyday life where I live, you know. So a lot of the things that people were doing were just their own little episodes that they get involved in, and they looked at me like I was something like a friend or a brother or a father or someone that understood, because I learned in prison that you can't really tell anyone anything because everybody's got their own perspective. And all you can do is reflect people back at themselves and let them make up their own mind about things. So when Beausoleil come to me with, could I be a brother, I told him certainly, you know. So we were like in a little brotherhood together, like we didn't lie to each other. And whatever he said do, I would do. And whatever I said do, he would do. But as far as lining up someone for some kind of helter-skelter trip, you know, that's the district attorney's motive. That's the only thing he could find for a motive to throw up on top of all that confusion he had. There was no such thing in my mind as helter-skelter. Helter-skelter was a song. And it was a nightclub. We opened up a little after-hours nightclub to make some money and play some music and do some dancing and singing and play some stuff to make some money for doom buggies to go out in the desert. And we called the club Helter Skelter. It was a Helter Skelter club because we would be there, and when the cops would come, we'd all melt into other dimensions because it wasn't licensed to be anything in particular. And that was kind of like a speakeasy back in the moonshine days behind the movie set. And I'm an outlaw. They're right there, you know. And I'm a gangster, and I'm bad, and I'm all the things that I want to be. I'm pretty free within myself. I cut people, and I shoot them, and I do whatever I have to do to survive in the world I live in. But that has nothing to do with me breaking the line. Let me explain something about the penitentiary in my mind. I came to Gibault in Terre Haute, Indiana, overlooking the federal penitentiary in Indiana, and I was raised by a bunch of monks. that taught us how to tell the truth and how to play handball and how to box in a boxing ring. So I learned to fight early, and I ran off and stole a bicycle, and then I went to reform school for that. And I ran off from reform school, and all my life I've been in prison. I've been in jail running off. I never went to school. I've never grown up. I've never accepted the system. I've always accepted the old man, the old winos, and I accepted the retired veterans that were guards at the prisons and cottage supervisors and such. But there's a line that man walks. All men walk a line. And I walk that line in prison. I don't tell on other people. I don't carry tales about other people. If someone's going to kill themselves, I feel obligated by Christian ethics to tell him, don't do that. Your life is worth more than that. But if he continues to go in a self-destructive path, I step from his way. I get out of his way. I've learned that in prison. Someone's got a knife and they're going to do something. I say, don't do that. And they say, I'm going to do it. I say, I'm gone. It's got nothing to do with me. So they called me on the phone and said, the guy's got a gun. What do I do? I said, well, if he's got a gun, he must be afraid of something.
Hold on now. I think he's kind of straying away from what you had going.
Okay.
I'm right there in Beausoleil's murder.
Yeah, I think he's taught.
You know,
that's all right. That's
I'm right there on the telephone where he called and asked me what to do. This is the point where I got convicted.
Go ahead.
It would come from the witness stand that when on the telephone, the only thing that ever connected me with Hinman's murder was Beausoleil called me and asked me what to do. And I told him, you know what to do. I didn't tell him like, you know what to do. I told him, man, you're a man. Grow up, juvenile. Don't ask me what to do. Stand on your own 2 feet. Be responsible for your own actions. Don't ask me what to do. I just got out of prison. I don't want to go back to jail. I know what walking that line is. It's a straight razor in the barbershop in McNeil Island. I worked in the straight razor. I worked in the barbershop in McNeil Island. I was with all the old men that came out of Alcatraz. I don't break the law. The old man tells me, if you don't break the law, you don't have to go to jail. You break the law, you're putting yourself in jail. The law is there in the will of God. You break that law, you're breaking the will of God, and you're going to go to jail. When I got out, that was my symbol. Everybody else was doing this and different symbols. I would do that. And they'd say, what is that symbol? I'd say, that symbol is I got one positive thought. I'm in a rebirth movement. I just come out of prison. I got a chance to start over. And I'm starting over. And I'm not breaking no laws. So don't come around me with nothing. I don't want no money. I'll eat out of garbage cans. I'll stay on the complete bottom. I'm underneath this snake here. I'm not breaking no law. So a lot of people came to me from the underworld and in the outlaw world and run away from the war, from the Vietnam War. That was, what's his name? Them guys that testified for you and them motorcycles. Them Italian kids that came off of that Venice, California. They took the witness stand and they said everything they could get away with to get their cases dropped. There wasn't a witness that took that witness stand that didn't have.
Went to the hearing, Mr. Manson. Just talk about the crime. Any changes from what I read?
Well, that's what made that. That's what wrote that down. Is what all these people said to you guys. You know, they told you all these trips about what I said and when I said it. How in the hell can you possibly know what I said to somebody 25 years ago in a corner of when we were only talking to ourselves and I couldn't even remember what I said. I may have said just anything, but I know what I would say now, and I don't lie, so I know what I would say then. You know, and I certainly wouldn't tell nobody to go in and do nothing to anybody that I wouldn't want done to me. Okay. I got it. Listen. I got enough sense to know that if I spit on you, that gives you the God-given right to spit on me back. Anything I do to you, you got the right to do right back to me, and I'm not going to get caught up in that. I've been in jail long enough to know if you go over on the other side of that yard and you beat somebody up, and you walk that lines, sooner or later somebody's going to beat you up.
Okay, let me go on a little bit, okay, and talk about your prior criminality. You covered it pretty well. It says here that you started your criminal history when you were very young. Is that right? Back in '48, you went to Terre Haute, Indiana, boys' school because of a burglary of a grocery store. Then you went AWL from the school and was placed in Indiana State Reformatory.
Before you get into that, before you rush me off into that,
okay.
Every time I go to these committees, I'll wait 2 or 3 years for you. And I'll sit in the cell and stare at the wall for 2 or 3 years, just waiting for you people. And then when you get here, you can't even give me 5 minutes.
No,
You're in such a rush,
all
you know.
Then what I'm
You have
trying
to slow down with my mind and to see where
All right.
your mind is. You
All
know,
right.
like
You're right.
let me say this: the courtroom Charles Older would not have been sitting on that bench had I not went in the courtroom. So we're kind of like married in this thought together. Like we're together whether we want to be here together or not. You know, we're stuck in this madness. You know, I don't want this job. I'm not getting paid very much. You know,
No, that's
and
true.
you're certainly going to get paid if you take your time. So give me a time to finish what I was trying to do, will you, please?
Is it on the crime, Mr. Manson?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Then
It's the very same thing that you read.
Okay.
You know,
Go
I
ahead.
kind of anticipated what you were going to say because you've been saying the same thing for 20 years.
All right.
This has grown so much that the people living in my life have moved in with uniforms and penitentiaries. They built whole penitentiaries in the fear that they've generated off of this case. So the public can feel safe against this monster. We're going to charge you $200 million to build another set of penitentiaries.
Mr. Manson.
So people living in my life, they don't care whether I broke the law or not. They'll make up a lot of things and sell a lot of books, 58 of them to be exact. And billions of dollars have been made. And it's okay if I have to spend my life in prison. Let me finish. Just to hold me because I've shown you some strong strength and I haven't surrendered to this by copping out to you or telling tales on someone else or playing weak. You've medicated me, you've burnt me, you've beat me, you've stabbed me, you've done everything you can do to me, and I'm still here, and you're still going to have to face the truth about this case sooner or later, if not here in the street.
All right, Mr. Manson. I'm going to give you an opportunity to give a closing statement, and you can read that or talk about that at that particular time. We're going to now talk about your prior criminality. I said before, and I think you stated that you were placed in a boys' school at an early age in 1948 for burglary. You tried to escape from there or run away, whatever it was, and you were placed in the Indiana State Reformatory. Again, went AWOL in February of '51. You stole an automobile, went to Utah. You were arrested there, and you were convicted of the Dyer Act and sentenced to the National Training School for Boys in Washington, D.C. Your adult convictions, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 adult convictions, beginning in 1955 and ending in 1969. They consisted of the Dyer Act. You were sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for that. Attempted escape, 5 years probation. Forgery and mail theft, 10 years suspended. Los Angeles probation violation, 10 years federal prison. McNeil Island, Washington. South Ukiah, interfering with an officer, 3 years probation. And in Ventura, reproducing or possession of a driver's license. And in Los Angeles was the incident offense of murders. Now, you said you also spent time in Mexico in a prison?
Yeah, I was in Mexico before.
In prison down there?
Mexico City prison, yeah, immigration prison.
What was that? Oh, what was that for?
I had been accused of killing some French people and a couple of dudes in Acapulco.
And how long were you in prison down there?
I was there a couple of different times.
A couple of times? I have here on your personal factors, Mr. Manson, that you were born in 1934 in Cincinnati, Ohio. Your mother was Kathleen Maddox, who never, and you never saw your natural father.
That's not true.
It's not true?
No, my father's name was William Manson.
William?
Yes.
And did you live with him for a while?
No, you know, it's one of those divorce trips where you see a guy walk by and he's your father, and you really don't. I remember his boots, and I remember when he went to the war. I remember when his uniform, but I don't remember what he really looked like.
Your mother was arrested shortly after the birth and sentenced to prison for assault and robbery.
Yeah.
And you lived with your maternal grandparents and your aunt in West Virginia. You don't have a southern accent, do you?
When I need it.
Yeah, when you need it. You later resided foster homes until you were made a ward of the court in '47. The rest of the juvenile life was spent in various reformatories and boys' schools in Pennsylvania and Indiana. You dropped out of school at the age of 9 in the 3rd grade. You married Rosalie Willis in 1954. The marriage ended in divorce in 1956. You have one son, Charles Jr., which resulted from this marriage. But you've not seen your son since the divorce. Is that correct, Mr. Manson?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. It says there no military service. You used LSD extensively, mescaline, amphetamines, and barbiturates, but no alcohol. Is that correct?
No.
Well, enlighten me.
I've taken a few tabs of acid. I smoke grass. I smoke a little hash. I don't mess with drugs per se. I don't do anything that's self-destructive. I like the cactus buds. They're spiritual experience. And
Peyote?
the mushrooms are okay.
Yeah.
I drink Scotch whiskey. I like Scotch whiskey. And I drink beer occasionally. I'm not much of a wine drinker, but now and then some wine with the meals, all right?
Do you get any of that in here?
No.
All right. We're going to, remember I said there were 3 areas of the hearing. The second area is your post-conviction factors. We may come back to this. I told you one area we have questions.
Do I get to say anything about that?
Oh, yeah, you're going to in just a little bit. We're going to go to your post-conviction factors and your psychiatric evaluation. Now, that's everything that's happened to you since your last hearing, and also the evaluation. And Deputy Commissioner Brown will handle that on my far right.
Thank you, Mr. Conley.
You're welcome.
Do I get a minute here in between there?
What do you want a minute?
To respond to just what that record that you laid out there?
We'll go back to that.
There's no way my mind can handle that.
All right.
In other words, I don't have the papers you have, and I can't refer to what you're referring
Yes,
to.
you may respond to this right now. If you
Okay,
wish.
okay.
All right, go ahead.
What that whole first 11 years being locked up in, it was trying to get away. You got a juvenile, you lock him up in juvenile hall, he don't know anything. He's got no parents. He's got nobody telling him the truth. Everybody's lying to him. So the only thing he can do is run away. So that's all I did. I ran away. And every time I ran away, they just got me and put me in a harder place to get away. So every time I would run away, they would take me and put me in a more difficult place to run away until I got to the federal prison system. I ran through Indiana, and I ran through Illinois, and I ran through Ohio. And then when they put me in Washington, D.C., Dr. Hartman put me in Virginia, Natural Bridge Camp with the moon, and that was in 51. Then I went to Petersburg, Camp Petersburg, Virginia, where they got the military academy. And then I went to Pennsylvania. Then I went to Ohio. And then in 1954, I got out. And I really didn't know what I was doing. I was still 9 years old in 3rd grade in my mind. I couldn't very well know what was going on. You know, I never had any help from anyone. No one ever done anything for me. So what I did was I married the first girl I came to and stole a car and came to California because that's where she wanted to come. And I just followed her around like a blind guy because I really didn't know. California was, you know, I didn't know what California was. You know, I'm a dumb hillbilly. I thought the pigeons were seagulls and the seagulls were pigeons. I didn't know the difference, you know. So when I got to California, it was all about fighting in the county jail. I wasn't out on the street for maybe 2 or 3 weeks before they had me in the jail back in Terminal Island. So I went through the lieutenant there, and they brought the guys, lieutenants, and the men that were in the uniform from the dentist office and all the Navy and the doctors from Dr. Hartman. They brought them from back east. They brought them to Terminal Island with a lot of the old-time gangsters that were being released as going to Needles, California, and out in the desert and doing different things in the mafia world, in that old underworld where they made all that moonshine and stuff. So I learned all the things they learned. So this, I'm picking up all these things from all these older men. So they're laying out to me what's right and what's wrong. And I don't really know what's right and what's wrong because people that say what's right and wrong, they're not doing what they say. They're doing something different than what they say, you know. So I had to find all this out for myself. So then when you keep calling me a criminal and keep calling me a bad guy, then I got to be all the things that you think in your mind that I am, which is that's not really what I am. You got me being a bastard. You got me being a dope fiend. You got me being, everything's bad. I'm only 5 foot tall. I was 5'7", then I went to 5'6". Now I'm down to 5'2". I figure about another 20 years I'll be about 4 feet tall. Because everybody's just constantly pushing it over on me like they got permission to get away with doing anything they want to do to me because I don't have no parents, because I don't have no money, because I don't have no education. You got to have education or some parents or you're not smart. You got to be stupid if you don't read and write. You know, you've got to be all the things that are bad if you ain't got nobody to protect you. Because you find out in that cell, the only person that loves you is Jesus Christ. And that rebirth movement in 1967 was mine. Now you can tell Carter and all them other people that's been stealing my life every day and living in my reality, you know, that they could read Corinthians 13, chapter verse, you know, that'll handle that part of it.
Right.
That's the end of what I got to say there.
You did a good job there. We're going to go to the second area of the hearing now. Mr. Brown will handle your post-conviction.
I'm going to start right in with your CDC 115s. You have about 60 of them. And it doesn't appear that you have been doing very much to change them. I won't go all the way back past 1981. As a matter of fact, I'll start in 83. The last time you appeared before the board was 1981, and I'm sure that that panel reviewed all of those 115s with you prior to that time. There's 60 of them starting from that time. Disrespect towards staff, possession of a hacksaw blade, you have a copy of those?
No.
And violence, dangerous property.
No, I know what all those are, though.
I want to read a couple this year that you had. March 14th, 1992, threatening staff. On 3/14/92 at approximately 15:10 hours while conducting my duties as floor officer, I was sweeping the upper tier of A section with inmate Manson, D3392 over every demanded I go out to the shoe yard and clear the showers now, clean the showers now because in our his opinion they're dirty. I informed inmate Manson that I wouldn't have time to clean them today. Inmate Manson began to call me a liar and a treacherous bitch. Inmate Manson also stated I would like to break all the bones in your body, starting with your elbow, working down to your knees. Then inmate Manson stated, tell that man up there, the control booth operator, to open the cell door and let me beat you into submission so that you'll be under my power. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
Threatening staff?
Do I get to explain?
You want to explain that?
Yeah.
You got it. Go ahead.
Prison is a treacherous place to live in. You miss one move and you get stabbed. You got to be aware of everything that goes on. There's nothing that you can overlook. You got to be aware of your air in the ventilator that you breathe, because if you got emphysema and a ninja warrior gets in your air, he can stop your air. So out in the shower area, they got some rust that's coming out of the pipes. And this rust is building up, and it looks just exactly like instant coffee. If you take a spoonful of that rust and you mix it in with instant coffee and you give somebody a cup of coffee, you can burn their kidneys out. You can kill them. So there's a deadly substance out in the yard that needs cleaned up. Because if I'm aware of this substance, when someone else comes out, they see this substance, they may pick some of it up and put it in my coffee. So I try to be aware of everything. So I asked the woman when she came to work, I said, would you take the hose that you've been watering me down with and squirting me with when no one's looking, and go out there and squirt down that yard and clean up that mess out there to where, and she says, well, no, she wasn't going to do that. I said, well, somebody needs to do that because it's a danger, you know. So she said she didn't want to do it, and she called me a liar, so I called her a liar back. Now, whether you want to accept this or not, the deer in the woods, there's a doe and there's a buck. And the buck comes up to the doe and scares the doe, and the doe turns around and backs up to the buck. That's a matriarch and a patriarch. I live in a patriarch. You live in a matriarch. You back up to your women. I don't back up to my women. I don't take no lip from my women. I don't give them none, but I don't take none either. If they disrespect me, I'll disrespect them back. If they hit me, I'll hit them back.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I'm going to read these other two because they're along the same line. You keep your thought, and I'll let you continue to go in that vein for a short while longer. But I'm not going to allow you to ramble all day.
You got it.
The second one, February the 1st, 1992, written by an officer by the name of Bass. You told her, Bass, you're a fucking punk. She attempted to counsel. You stated, Bass, open this fucking door, and I'll take that stick away from you and beat your ass with it. We got another one. February the 10th, 1992. officer by the name of Mooney. Became verbally abusive, saying, "Get your nose out of my ass, you bitch." When I attempted to proceed with CDC 115, Manson exposed his penis and said, "Suck my dick, you black bitch, you're nothing but a witch." Manson then proceeded to spit on me. Now you may go ahead and conclude your statement that you were making about why this kind of behavior keeps going on, as far as you're concerned.
Prison is a place where they keep men. They chew tobacco, they spit, they cuss, they do bad things. They ride horses, they fall down. It's not a place where women should be working. Women come in here, we're sitting on the toilet, we have to bear down and take our clothes off and bend over and show our private parts, and they stand there and gawk. And it's not a place for a woman. I wouldn't want my mother working in a prison if I had one. I wouldn't want my sisters. I wouldn't want my old ladies working in a prison. And prison and the authoritarian type jobs kind of, they like certain kinds of jobs. Some women that don't like men, they like these kind of jobs. They can get over on some men, and they feel really good about that because they didn't like their father and they don't like men anyway. Well, I don't particularly like men either. Whatever men is, whatever that is to them, has got nothing to do with what it is to me. So what it is to me is like, I say a lot of words. They say are bad words. For me, they're just words. I don't see good words or bad words. Good and bad is up to the individual to decide whatever he feels like is good words. So when you're talking to a man, you say, "Hey, you old dirty how the hell are you, you old ding dong, movie baba?" You're saying things that you're capping what they call the dozens. You're rapping back and forwards, and you got a guy, and you're sitting there rapping, and you let a stinker, and there's two guys in the room, and one of them smells it and looks at the other one and says, "Wasn't me." I mean, there's only two of you there. It couldn't, I mean, now you're going to lie to yourself, So me and this man is standing there, and we're rapping and man talk back and forwards, and this woman come around the corner like I was talking to her. I wasn't talking to her to start with. I was talking to the guy.
You have enough sense to understand that when you've accumulated this many disciplinaries, that somewhere along the line, somebody is saying that you're doing it wrong. And somewhere in your mind, you need to make some kind of decision that you're going to make a choice to stop. Now, you can sit up and you can rationalize and you can come up with all the rhetoric that you want to, but it isn't going to get you out of the hole. You're just going to continue to dig yourself in deeper.
Okay. Can I explain that?
Go ahead.
The turnaround comes to push, push comes to shove, shove comes to looking around and see where you're up above or down below, where you're at and how it turns. Something that says it's good, say it's bad, that's good, say what it is, that's cool. So when you gets cool, you got some fool come through the door, you don't know what he's doing about what. He just come and fell out of the water like a fish on the floor. And he don't know what he's doing, he got no idea where he's at, and he's coming in other people's lives talking about words he don't even know nothing about. Then he comes into my world, my life, and tells me, roo, some old punk-ass motherfucker shit that's going to get me killed if I don't put up some force fields in his mind and get his ding-dong ass off me. So I tell him, get off me. If you don't get off me, I'll teach you how to get off me. Now, he learns that. He turns that around, and he tells the inmate, you get up against that wall and shake down. And then he learns his man from getting the man, and when they feel real secure, then they have to get them 115s in before I get to parole, because they want to get them 115s in because they don't want to ever let me go. Because if they let me go, they lose the best thing they got because they feel secure as long as they got me locked up in a cell. They feel like, they got the man right there in the box where they can go back and say what's what to who and said where do you represent who in what park or whose courtroom. See, here's the thing. Let me say this to you, Chief Thomas. When we
hold up just a minute. My name is written right there.
Yeah,
don't
Brown.
You ever call me anything but that name right there. Do you understand?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now proceed.
Sure. So it comes to this. It's like, I'm not going to try to kid you. I'm not going to try to play nothing with you.
And I'm not going to play with you.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something.
Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
You wait.
Oh, you want to kick me out of here now?
No, I'm not going to kick you out of here. No way I'm going to kick you out.
We're locking horns and what? What do you want to prove?
I'm not going to tell corrections what to do with you. But we're going to follow some kind of decorum and procedure in this hearing room.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let you go just a little bit longer on this that you're talking about. Then we're going to move to your psych reports. Now, go ahead.
I reflect the procedure back to stay alive, man. And I got to get nasty sometimes. Because everybody you send in here working over me is not a nice guy, you know. I think if any of you have any experience in jail, you know that jail is not a very nice place to be. And you have all kinds of different people on all kinds of different levels, and I have to deal with all those levels. I have to deal with every kind of psychotic maniac you got in the world trying to burn me up, trying to beat me up, trying to get some attention to get me in any kind of direction they can. And I have to propose a certain image and keep a certain kind of guy stuck up there to keep those bullies off of me. Because if I show any weakness, if I fall down in any perspective, I get ate up. Because I run with a pack of wolves, and I got to be a wolf. And when it reflects back to you that I'm a no good so and so forth, I'm reflecting the procedure that's reflected onto me. If I don't have any other choice but to get a 115 to stay out of something more dangerous or more terrible, rather than stay out of my cell and fight this big old ugly guy, I'm going to call him a bunch of names so he put it on paper. And then when he puts it on paper, I say, well, I didn't have to go with that physically. Then I could do it mentally. As long as I run my job mentally and I get it put on the paper, then physically I can walk around all that violence and I can stay in peace and harmony.
You say that you're deliberately keeping yourself placed in a secure.
No, I'm saying that we're all doing this. We all use each other in different perspectives all the time. It's the song saying, love won't let you go. It ain't got nothing to do with love won't let you go. It's people need you that they don't want to let you go. They need you for different reasons. They need you to feel secure in. Because if they got guys they're afraid of, you got 2 or 3 dudes over there that are bad and you're afraid of them and you're the correctional officer, but yet you got a guy over here that ain't afraid of you. It's like this woman comes to work and goes over to this guy and tells him, turn your radio down. And he tells her, tell everybody to get out of bed, run her off. So she comes over to my cell because she sees that he's afraid of me. So she takes my radio away and looks back at him and says, So then she uses me to stand up over you. Because in the darkness on the yard out there, you do what I tell you to do. When you're on that committee, I'll do what you tell me to do. I'm the man in here. And that's a fact.
We're off the record right now.
Yes, sir.
No talking. To the chance team.
Not by choice.
No talk.
I can't show you no weakness either. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
This is tape 2 in the case of Charles Manson, April 21st, 1992, California State Prison, Cochran, California. You're going to proceed to your psychiatric evaluations. You don't have one. Well, you have one for this year, but you didn't have one completed for the Board of Prison terms specifically. Bruce T. Reed, R.E.E.D., Ph.D., clinical psychologist, went over to see you on February the 19th, and you refused to be evaluated. Any reason why?
Yeah, I had 2 other doctors trying to evaluate me at the same time. I can't write that many books.
What doctors were trying to interview you?
Well, see, the front side, you see the doctor coming to me to give me help. The back side, he gathers information and goes to Turkey. And he's over in France writing books about psychotherapy or group therapy.
Which doctors came to visit you at the time Dr. Reed tried to get in?
I think Dr. Christopherson, Dr. White.
Where are they from?
Right here. Since then, I think Christopherson's been fired. Ethics violation of some sort. Then there's Willis, Dr. Willis.
Willis came over to see you this?
Willis has been my psychiatrist. We went through, if you'll check the record, we went through 2 sessions. He said I was okay for level 3. He said that I was all right for level 3. What this latest doctor wants is, what's happening out of Frisco, this law firm is coming up with new psych evaluation with the Prisoners Union. The Prisoners Union in San Quentin, they got a bunch of inmates to sign a suit for better psychiatric treatment. But what that means is more political power because they're using the psychiatric base to get their doctors in here so they can get doctors up over the uniform so they can hold the reality up over the courts and the minds of the people that live inside the prisons. Because when they can do that, then they can do Vacaville. See, when I left Vacaville, there was 12 dead doctors there with heart attacks. Dr. Morgan was the last doctor that they found dead in the parking lot with his brains blown out. I went through doctors.
Dr. Christopherson saw you on January the 24th of this year.
Yes, sir.
And in his report of that date, states that he went over to see you because you were not eating. The staff were
he came to see
concerned,
me 2 or 3 times about that.
but he didn't appear to be concerned because he said you ate either candy bars or canteen or
I fast a lot.
or whatever. He wasn't concerned about your not eating. He talked about your paranoid delusional disorder at that time in his report.
Perspective.
He prescribed a plan for you, and that was to put you on frequent weights. He said this will have 2 effects. One, they will support the denied effect that he is on hunger strike, and they will also give the inmate a chance to get out of his cell and engage in a form of environmental stimulation. On the same vein, 1, will have more frequent visits to the psychiatrist. This 2 will monitor signs and symptoms of actual psychosis versus malingering. 3, if indeed he is on a hunger strike, it should be considered for the MOU. What is MOU?
That's some kind of
Memorandum of Understanding. He does refuse psychotropic
medical observation.
medical observation unit.
Mm-hmm.
If indeed he's on if he does refuse psychotropic medications, we may ask him to go for PIA decision, which is a judge-ordered involuntary medication. It should also be noted that we should have a careful monitoring of his intake and output, including material from the canteen. So he's suggesting that you were kind of faking things a little bit.
Whenever you do something beyond someone else's understanding, and they don't want to understand it, they'll hate it, look at it as being bad. It isn't really bad. I fast to tighten my stomach up. It makes me healthy. It's a spiritual experience. Sometimes I go 10, 15, 30 days. Sometimes I go longer than that. I fast until I can get my mind straight around whatever. When a bad circumstance comes to me and I have to deal with the mental situation all around me, I'm surrounded by inmates and officers and all kinds of things beyond your comprehension. I have to set and I have to balance all those things in my mind. So what I do is I quit eating. And when I quit eating, what happens is that everybody trusts, and trust is going one way, but trust goes the other way too. I'm your economy. If I don't eat, then you don't know whether I'm trusting you, because the only way you know if I trust you is if I eat from your hand. So I hold all the trust with the food. And when I don't eat, then everybody gets scared. And they start going through, they're not sure. And then I'm paranoid. Because anything around me is going to be my fault because I'm the last chicken in line. One chicken, the dogs bark at the chickens, and the chickens get to pecking on each other, and then they get the last chicken in line, and they just peck him till he either is gone or they get it straightened around, you know. And like being the last chicken in line, I have to take up the slack. So what I do is I quit eating, and then all the fat people that can't quit eating, they start going through a lot of changes. When I show them, I'm about 10 times stronger than they ever thought about dreaming about, you know. Yeah.
What have you done in all the years that you've been in prison that this panel or anybody else could look at that would indicate that there's been a change in Charles Manson?
I change all the time, sir. Every day I'm going to change.
Well, I can't measure that. You have to tell me.
Can I ask you a couple of questions? What did you do before this? So I know what foundation I'm in your mind where I can speak to you from. You got any jurisprudence? You got any correctional officer experience or policeman or what?
I don't think you need to know that. All you need
Can
to
I
know
ask
is,
you?
Just answer the question.
all you need to know is that I'm sitting on this panel today.
Okay, well, we'll go to the judge. The judge sits on the bench and he takes in his mind crime. It comes to him for judgment. It goes through his understanding, and he watches the judge itself. The judge really doesn't judge it. He judges, he lets the district attorney and it passes through his understanding. He does this 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, 5 days a week. He retired 65 years old. He's done that for 8,000 hours. I've done the same thing all my life, 24 hours a day, so I'm about 15 Supreme Court judges in my mind. In other words, I know more about law than anybody in the world. I know more about courts and procedures and criminology and penology and procedure than any card sharp dealing doubles off the bench in Monte Carlo. I know more about the economy, more about money, more about the government than any 10 presidents you got. You know, in other words, I've sat in solitary confinement and I watched everything you guys do. And the truth is, you're all lying to yourselves, you know, and like,
Mr. Manson, you're not answering Mr. Brown's question.
I'm not.
No, he asked you, what have you done in the institution to show the Board of Prison Terms and society that you've changed?
I'm real with you. I don't pretend. I'm not bringing you a bunch of phony garbage. I'm not trying to tell you that I'm a good guy. I'm just myself, whatever that is. I believe in God, and I do the best I can every day by everybody I can. You know, when something bad comes up, I react bad to it. You know, I can fight. I can't read and write too good, but boy, I can fight. You wouldn't believe how I can fight because I've been fighting all my life to survive, and I live right on that edge of survival. You know, I just survive. I play a little music when I'm allowed to. I draw real good, but took my pencils. Everything I do, if I can do it real good, they'll take it away from me. I used to make little dolls with string, then he come took the string. So I'm not allowed to do anything, I'm not allowed any clothes. I haven't combed my hair in 2-3 years. You know, I can't comb my hair. I can't do anything.
Have you been involved in any psychiatric intervention?
Yeah. I've seen more doctors than doctors have seen inmates. I was Dr. Nickel there in the back alley over there in Vacaville, in the rec shack.
Was this at a therapy setting?
Well, I guess you could call it therapy setting. I was handling all the crazy people and taking care of the kids in the visiting room, holding in the garden in the chapel.
Was anybody doing anything?
No, everybody was doing what I told them.
No. Were any of the therapists doing anything to assist you in your life?
No, it was me doing it for them. I had to look out for the veterans, just came back in the war, and all the wheelchairs and all the doctors. They had a lot of Vietnamese doctors come in who couldn't speak English. So I had to get the medication for all straightened around for that, you know, because my life at the bottom, I got to look out for everybody else's life too, or I can't get on through what I'm trying to do. I like to play music, but they took my music away. And I took my guitar away. That's the only thing I do. I play music. But they're scared of that. Anything I do, they're getting afraid of, and then they'll run and tell the cops that they're afraid of whatever I'm doing, and they run and take it away from me, and I'm allowed to do anything. So I just sit in the cell, you know. I don't really need to do anything because I'm doing everything all the way anyway. I'm already.
Now you keep talking about not being able to read and write.
Not that well. I read my book.
You have an IQ that's up well over 120.
Yeah, I'm pretty strong.
And you've been in prison all these years. Have you done anything at all to improve your grades?
Grades for what? What am I doing?
Well, you keep harping on the fact that you cannot read very well, nor can you write very well.
I'm not harping. I just explained that that's.
You keep saying it.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Have you done anything to improve your reading and writing skills?
Yeah, I read a book. I read a book. It was kind of boring, man. You know, I can think better things than I can read. I mean, reading is kind of like slowing down, and people only love each other in books. You can't love each other in reality because you're all trapped in books, locked up in wars. You're all locked up in the Second World War, man. You're still fighting wars over there. You know, I was trying to unlock that war. That's what we was over there trying to unlock the wars. The Baba Randas came from India, and the Dr. Heiler used to come over and tell me what Baba Randas had to say about, you know, the Loving Love Center there in Berkeley, where they have the higher minds of the religious perspective.
Okay, so you haven't done any of those kind of things.
Well, what I'm trying to explain to you without a lot of, I want to appear like I'm somebody, but I'm on top of everything. I'm the smartest guy in the world. You know, I don't think there's anywhere in the world, there's another subject I can't tell you everything you want to know about it, you know. I can even fix a Harley Davidson motorcycle. I shortchanged. I know how to deal off the bottom. I've learned everything that you taught me, Dad. Yeah. Well, now where are we going now?
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Manson, we're going to the third area of the hearing now, parole plans. Mr. Steele.
Yeah, thank you. We have to talk about your parole plans. Do you know the statement you made to your counselor?
No.
You stated that you have no plans for the future. You also stated that you were not interested in parolee and that he would be lost in our society. His main concern at this time is to be released to a general population setting in order to program.
Makes sense to me.
That's a good statement if it's yours. It doesn't sound like you.
Well,
Was that your statement?
yeah, basically I said that to that Bob, yeah. But I might have said something else to somebody else in a different perspective. I generally say to people what they want to hear.
Hold it. What brought you talking about?
Some caseworker woman. I mean, it was Virginia, I think her name was Virginia.
Wrong. Correctional counselor?
Yeah, who was it?
I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah,
You're a counselor, you should know.
well, yeah, there's all kinds of counselors.
Talk
man.
too loud, my agent said.
They turn over all the time. They come and go like, I can't keep track of those.
Montero.
Each one, huh?
Montero.
Montero, yeah. I think that's a woman.
It's not a broad, it's a woman.
Yeah, that's what I said, woman.
Okay, that's good enough.
Let me explain something.
I didn't ask you none yet. Just want to get the statement out of the way. Is that your statement?
Partner
Part of it.
to that person on that level. I got other legs. Cockroach got 8 legs. Scorpion's got 6.
You said that you would be lost in our society today.
Well, my position is taken.
You're safe in here with our society.
No, I got nothing to say. I'm not in that. The position that I should be holding is taken by someone else.
All right, let me tell you what you got here. You may have seen them yourself. You have 45 what the counselor called fearful letters. Fearful letters are opposing your parole. Is that right?
I got a bunch of them, but I think they're all from one person, aren't they?
Well, it would appear that they're written by different people at a certain time, except for a few. And it's all based on some rumor you let out of this joint that you were going to be paroled and that you would be accepting hideout base and money in the bank, and that's what you put out as a rumor. Did you do that?
Can't say for real.
Can't say for real.
No, there's a lot of rumors that go in and out of different things I've been doing. That's what's hard about this whole thing. It puts so much pressure on me that everything I say or do gets twisted around to what people want it to be, what they want it to have said. It hasn't really got anything to do with what it really is. It's what other people need it to be.
This appeared in an article in the paper, I know that. There it is. Charlie Manson should never return to society. It was written because the news media said that Charlie Manson masterminded through his clan the outrageous murder of Sharon Tate. According to them, they did it to put fear into the system. Now the system may be putting fear into us. Federal Witness Protection Program has planned a program to release Charlie Manson.
Yeah, they offered me a place in Valachi.
Who was they?
The FBI.
What do you got to do with the FBI? You don't have nothing to do with the FBI. Nothing.
Yes, I do. I was a barber in the federal penitentiary for 20 years.
He's a snitch.
Nope. That's the reason I didn't take the program. If I had been
Well,
a snitch,
anyway,
I'd have been gone to Virginia.
There was a surge there in 1990 that almost got out of hand for you.
Well, they've come to me 2 or 3 times. They want me to work and do different draw profiles for new criminal types. And when that New Mexico thing jumped off, they asked for some help. I'm not really an informant type guy.
Okay, now you tell me what you want to do when you get paroled. Mom and Dad? You got a mom and dad? Alive yet? Sir?
I'd like to explain. I really would.
You don't have to. I'm just.
But I mean, I really want to. I really want to.
The question is, you have folks.
But you don't understand. Each one of you is somebody. I'm nobody. I'm nothing. I'm now. I've been now all my life. My mother went to prison and left me. And everybody's lied to me. A few old men in the Second World War were honest with me, you know. The older dudes were, you know, I used to work in the hospitals. They were square, you know. I've always run a main line with the guys that were truthful and honest. And like the reason you haven't been able to kill me is you haven't been able to find me. Because every time you send somebody after me, they can't find me because I'm not really there in your minds. It's like you draw a line across the desert and I'm sitting there and you come and draw a line, you say, you can't get out of there. And I say, out of where? You say, you're locked up. I said, locked up in what? He said, well, you're locked up and we're free. And I said, oh, yeah. And then you walk back and forth and you play important with my life as if you got something that I want, you know, like you got out and I'm supposed to be in, but yet I'm everywhere and I'm out and in and I'm all around. I'm down the San Diego Zoo and I'm riding a motorcycle and I'm your children and I'm the trees and I'm the clouds.
Hold it up.
I'm crazy and
hold it up.
You got to get another doctor. Yes, sir.
I get the point.
In other words, like you won't find the one here, man.
You do have some letters on your behalf. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll find here. Support letters. Sharon Quimbley, Sharon Quimbley, Cindy White. Do you know a Cindy White?
No, I know Squeaky. She's doing time. She wrote a letter to the president.
Marvin Ramon Ransom. You don't know that person?
No, I don't know.
These are your supporters now.
Well, I didn't know I had any supporters.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really need any supporters, actually. I thought I was
George Stinson, Cincinnati, Ohio.
Simpson, yeah, George, St. George, yeah, he's a good man. He's an Orthodox, religious kind of guy. He's got very good mind.
Relative of yours?
Huh?
Is he a relative?
No, spiritually we're allied. I'm allied spiritually with a lot of things.
Okay. He wrote a 2-page letter for you. Cindy White, again, she has.
I never really applied for this or asked my friends for any support.
Well, I know that, but you do have some people out there that are interested in you.
But you realize where most of those letters come from, don't you?
I don't have an idea.
Ulterior motives. I think the doctor sent you one. But he sent it to you and he didn't sign his name. He sent it through Sacramento. They hoodwink their own paperwork, and then when it comes back, then he can keep me here, and then he can build a medical association with me.
You talking about Dr. White?
Yeah, Dr. White and Christoph.
Did you want to show us something here? Pictures?
Oh, no, I had some pictures here. No, these are just, I'm working on a zoo project for the ecology. I got frogs, and I got hawks, and turtles, lizards, and I'm working on the backside of this game, trying to get CC camps. We tried to start CC camps when I was in Folsom with Governor Brown That's when Squeaky and Red and Blue and Gold was out. That's when we were running colors out.
Okay, one last thing I have. Somewhere I read that you were getting $500 for an autographed picture of you on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
How is that done?
Well, you see, I live in the underworld. You live in the overworld. I do a lot of things underworld that you guys don't see.
Mm-hmm.
I made about 75 albums in Vacaville.
Mm-hmm.
And I bootlegged about 3 times more music than the Beatles put out.
Music?
Yeah. I had the surfboard and the Beach Boys, but I didn't sell it. Because every time I would go to the music, they'd want to change the music. So rather than change the music, I went into the subculture with it. I got an old nuclear submarine that I had from the Navy when I was Section 8 in Leavenworth, Kansas, with Brother Dynamite and the Mafia coming off of Frankie Costello in the horseshoe pits in Pennsylvania in 1952.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, like, I'm an awful big fella. I'm really big. I got a great big body because my body's underground.
Tell me about the albums.
There's music about ecology, the air, aqua.
The pictures, autograph pictures were on albums. What you say?
No, that's just a backlash of the younger generations. Like,
Oh, you got me mixed up now.
remember the old movie where the piper, the Pied Piper, they said you play all the rats into the river and that they would pay you, and then the people never paid the Pied Piper, so they always kept losing their children. Well, you've lost 6 generations of children to me because you won't pay me what you owe me. Because I didn't break no law. I didn't kill nobody. I didn't tell nobody to get killed.
Okay.
I didn't get no trial.
Okay, Mr.
Yeah, we don't want to hear
That's
that. See?
I don't
We
have.
don't want to mix anything
Thank
up
you.
with the truth.
We're back to me. I'm the chairman.
I'm all done.
Okay? And this is time for questions by any one of the panel members and the district attorney. I have a couple of questions. Do you feel any responsibility for the murders?
Sure.
Okay. Could you elaborate briefly?
I influenced a lot of people unbeknownst to my own understanding of it. I didn't understand the fears of people outside. I didn't understand the insecurities of people outside. I didn't understand people outside. And a lot of things that I said and did affected a lot of people in a lot of different directions. It wasn't intentional, and it wasn't with malice or forethought.
Okay, you answered it.
Oh,
Do you have remorse, Mr. Manson? Do you feel any remorse for the victims whatsoever?
Now, we reach an impasse here, man. We're in pawn 4, bishop 4 to 7. Let's see. How do I finesse that? You say in your minds that I'm guilty of everything that you've got on paper. So therefore, it would run logic that I would need to have remorse for what you think is reality. And if that be true, then all the ocean's contents, if it were my tears, there would not be enough to express the remorse I have for the sadness of that world that you people live in.
Okay.
But I don't have, on the other side of that, I ask you back the same thing. You know, you've been using me ever since I was 10 years old. They used to beat me with leather straps, you know. It's like, does anyone have any remorse that I've spent 23 years in a solitary cell, and even on Devil's Island, you didn't keep anyone over 5 years. You broke every record that they've ever set on the planet Earth. You only kept Christ on the cross 3 days.
Mr. Manson, I think you answered the question. Do you still have a family? Per se, the type of the family you had at the time of the crimes. Do you still have a family?
Family.
Uh-huh.
That's another one of the district attorneys. See, when they set that case into the paperwork to make it real, they had to catch little words so they could turn all that in and make it into a reality. Hippie cult leader is a word that they used. leader, family.
Well, I believe I read in the reports where you yourself mentioned your family. And
Yeah,
that's
well,
the type of family
you keep
talking
driving
about.
that on me, and then I have to refer to what's already on me.
My simple question is, do you still have a family as existed at that particular time?
I can't answer that in just a breath. You know, it would take more time than you want to listen to me.
Well, yes or
answer
no.
that.
You either have a
Well,
family or
there's
you
no
don't.
yes or no, but I can
All right. All right. All right.
yes,
now,
no, or bloopy, or data, outside of good business, or rip it. You know, like
Okay.
you are stuck in yes and no. Yeah,
right.
yeah, all right.
Mr. Brown, do you have any further questions?
I have no further questions.
Mr. Cedal? All right. Mr. K, we're going to go to questions by the district attorney on something that has not been covered, anything that has not been covered, or something that he would like to emphasize. He will pose the questions to the panel. And when you answer the questions of Mr. Manson, would you answer the panel, please?
Sure.
Okay? Go ahead, Mr. K. Do you have any questions?
And we get to do this back the other way?
No.
Oh, yeah.
One way.
Now, what all you people think about that? yeah. Where are we at fair play, huh?
Now, let's
Yeah.
pay
Don't look at the
attention.
camera, look at the
Go ahead.
Yeah, I know.
Mr.
Yeah,
Kate.
I know the man when I see him.
Thank you. I think the interesting thing for the board to do here is to question Mr. Manson about the 9th murder he was convicted of. He doesn't mind talking about the Tate LaBianca murders and the Hinman murder because he's never accepted the law of conspiracy and aiding and abetting in California. And he always thought that if he didn't physically do the murder himself, that he wouldn't be guilty. His followers would be guilty, but he didn't really care about that. But the one murder that he doesn't like to talk about, because the evidence came out in court that he personally stabbed Shorty Shea to death. He stabbed him, Bruce Davis stabbed him, Tex Watson stabbed him. Yes.
This is time for questions. Do you have
Yes.
any questions?
Yes, that's the question. I would like you to ask Mr. Manson what he did to Shorty Shea and how Shorty Shea died.
Okay, you heard the question, Mr. Manson. Would you answer and face me and the panel and answer it, please?
Shorty Shea was not short. He was a great big guy, and he was very tough. He had everybody bullied, and he had everybody buffaloed. And there was a whole bunch of guys around. And he was pushing on Steve, and he was pushing on someone else. And I moved in, and I said, if you go into combat with someone, you don't hesitate. And I'm going to show you kids how to do this one time. And then don't invoke me to no violence anymore. And I moved on Shorty, and I put him in a situation where he couldn't move. And then I said, now can you understand what I'm saying to you? And he said, yeah. And I stepped up on the highway and hitchhiked a ride. And about 3 or 4 minutes later, someone stabbed him, and he was stabbed to death, and he was killed. Now, wait a minute. Anybody that knows anything about combat knows that when you go into a combat situation and you're on a line with something, that line can mean your life or your death. If you're on the line of life and death and you're gone and you're up on another line, that other reality is a completely different reality. It hasn't got anything to do with the other side of that line. I was on that side of the line, and it was a violent situation, and I did deal with it, and I put it into where it was. Let me say this, and there's only one way I explain it. The Duke in the joint is a guy that can fight with his fist. The count. Wait a minute. Let me explain this. This will explain it. The count is somebody who don't fight with his fist. He fights with his mind. He sits up on top of the count. When the count is clear, he runs the radio. And the Duke does all the physical things, like the first cop does his level, then the sergeant.
Mr. Manson.
I can't explain it to you, man. It don't have a yes or no.
Did you kill Shorty Shea?
No, I didn't have.
You didn't personally kill Shorty Shea?
Not personally, no.
Did you order him to be killed?
No, it was a fight, man. It was a.
Did you order him to be
No,
killed?
no,
All right.
no.
Another question, please.
All right, the last question, because I don't want to take up a lot of the board's time, but I'd like the board to ask Mr. Manson whether on the night of the Tate murders at the Tate house, after the murders were committed, did he go to the residence to see what had been done? And if so, what did he do when he was there?
You heard the question, Mr. Manson. Answer.
I had a traffic ticket in San Diego, but ask him why the district attorney moved the highway patrolman to the East Coast along with the traffic ticket.
Mr. Manson,
Yeah.
did you go to the residence
No,
after the murders?
no. And let me explain that to the board. The reason they want to say that is because they should have let me out of here 3 years ago. Because if I'm not on any scene of the crime, you can only keep me 18 years, and you've already had me 23. So I could sue you for Hearst Castle, probably.
Okay, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, are there any
Check.
other questions you
No.
have, Mr. Kate? Thank you.
Mate.
Now, this time we're going to have closing statements. First by the district attorney, and then you'll have the opportunity for the final closing statement before we recess. Mr. Kate.
Thank you very much. Penal Code Section 3041.5 B2 subsection C empowers the board to deny a life prisoner a new parole hearing for 5 years if you find three things. One, that the prisoner is unsuitable for parole. Two, that he has been convicted of more than 2 murders. And 3, it would not be likely that he would be suitable for parole during the period of 5-year denial. Charles Manson, through his actions in directing the murders of 9 innocent people, plus the attitudes and actions that he has shown while in prison for those murders, by those actions and attitudes, he has demonstrated unquestionably that he is deserving of a unanimous finding of unsuitability by the board and the maximum 5-year denial. Charles Manson attained his status as America's most famous and feared criminal by his powerful ability to control his followers, and from July 25th, 1969, through and including August 28th, 1969, lead them on a month-long murderous rampage. That murderous rampage started at Gary Hinman's residence on July 25th. Mr. Hinman was not killed until the 27th, but he was tortured over a 3-day period. And then went to the Tate house, where Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, Wojtek Rakowski, and Stephen Parent were killed on August 9th. Then on August 10th, Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. And on August 28th, Donald Shea. And I should repeat that the evidence was clear in this trial that Mr. Manson did stab Mr. Shea. The first 3 murders involving 8 victims were all tied into Mr. Manson's desire to foment or take advantage of a black-white race war. The murder of Shorty Shea was caused by Mr. Manson wanting to get revenge against him. The enormity and cruelty of these murders almost defies belief. The motive for the Tate and LaBianca murders is enough in and of itself for the board to deny Mr. Manson parole and Mr. Watson and the 3 girls parole forever. Helter Skelter. What was this and how did it start? Well, it started by Manson, who was the guru on LSD trips, leading his family members through the trips. They would listen to the Beatles' White Album. And Mr. Manson and the others, and it wasn't just Mr. Manson alone, because they would kind of feed on each other. And they determined, listening to the White Album with songs like Helter Skelter, Revolution 9, Blackbird, Piggies, Sexy Sadie, Back in the USSR, that the Beatles were the prophets talked about in Revelations 9 and 10 of the Bible. Mr. Manson, I heard, even is still quoting the Bible. He could quote the Bible very well, but twist it to mean what he wanted it to mean. Mr. Manson felt that there was going to be this black-white revolution, and the family was going to be the beneficiaries, because the blacks were going to kill all of the whites except for Manson and the family. And Manson and the family were going to escape to the bottomless pit, talked about in Revelations 9 and 10 of the Bible. And they would live in this bottomless pit for 50 to 100 years in miniaturized form. And then they would have grown to the size of 144,000, the 12 tribes of Israel. And at the end of this 50 to 100 year period, Manson and the family would come out of the bottomless pit, and there would only be blacks left. Black president, black senators, black congressmen. But Manson, who is a real racist, thought that blacks were too stupid to maintain power. And as soon as he and the family came out of the bottomless pit, the blacks would rush up to him and turn over all power. Now, it was never clear whether he was going to rule the world, but at least he was going to rule the United States. Now, I know this sounds bizarre, but the problem is that Manson and his followers believed in this motive enough to kill innocent people. At the trial, we showed that Manson was so serious about this that he went to a sporting goods store in Santa Monica and bought expensive golden rope that he was going to lower himself into the bottomless pit. He rented scuba equipment because he thought the entrance to the bottomless pit was under some underground river in Death Valley, and he was looking for the entrance. He brought topographical maps because he felt that he and the family were going to have to fight their way out of LA from the Spahn Ranch to Death Valley to get to the bottomless pit. He got a alliance with the Straight Satan's motorcycle gang in Venice that they were going to help protect him and lead him to the bottomless pit. He had one of the Straight Satan's members, Danny DiCarlo, who ran a gun room out in the Spahn Ranch where he had machine guns and other armaments, and DiCarlo would pack bullets. Now, there are 4 separate occasions of murder here. The first occasion of murder, the Hinman murder, was tied into Manson preparing for war. He needed money because he was buying armaments. He was buying dune buggies. He had his own dune buggy. He had a machine gun mounted on the dune buggy, and he had a sheath for his sword that he kept on the side. Well, he met Gary Hinman, who was a rock musician. He met him at Dennis Wilson's house, the same place he met Tex Watson. Dennis Wilson was the drummer for the Beach Boys. Manson thought that Hinman had come into an inheritance, and he wanted his money and his property, and he wanted Hinman to join the family. So he sent Beausoleil, Adkins, and Bruner to Hinman's house to get the property. Hinman was not interested in doing this. He hadn't come into an inheritance, and he didn't want to join the family. When he wasn't cooperating, Beausoleil called first Bruce Davis, and I know there's been some misconception here about who was Manson's chief lieutenant. Make no mistake about it, Bruce Davis was Manson's chief lieutenant, not Tex Watson. Tex Watson was certainly the major killer here, but when Manson was not at the ranch in charge, Bruce Davis was the one in charge. When Manson wanted somebody to study Scientology more, because that's how he used that a lot to control people, to get into their minds, he sent Bruce Davis to London to the Scientology headquarters to study Scientology. Anyway, Manson and Davis then went the second day to Hinman's house and tried to force him to turn over his property, and when he wouldn't cooperate, Manson sliced his ear off with Davis holding a gun on him. And then they left and let Beausoleil know, get the property or else, and of course it turned into or else, with Beausoleil killing him the third day, and Adkins holding a pillow over his nose and his mouth so he couldn't breathe while he was dying from the stab wound. Now, Manson always felt that the blacks were going to start the revolution, and when they didn't, he was very impatient. And finally, on the evening of August 8th, he told his family members, the only thing Blackie knows what to do is what Whitey shows him, and that's a quote. And so we're going to have to show Blackie how to do it. Now is the time for Helter Skelter. And so he told Watson, Adkins, Krenwinkel, and Kasabian to go to the residence. Now, the motive for the murders, make no doubt about it, was Helter Skelter, but Manson had an ulterior motive. He was very mad at the prior residents of the Tate House. He had been there before. He knew the layout. He and Watson had both been to a party there. But he was very mad at Terry Melcher, Doris Day's son, and his girlfriend, Candace Bergen, because Manson wanted a recording contract for Melcher, and Melcher auditioned him and wouldn't give him the contract. So the reason that this particular residence was picked out was because Manson wanted to send a message to Melcher and Bergen that there but for the grace of God go you. And he knew that they moved out. He knew that somebody else lived there at the time. He didn't know who they were. He didn't know any of these people at the residence. He knew that somebody famous lived there. And he told his followers that he wanted some gruesome murders. He even talked at one point about gouging eyeballs out and smashing them against the wall. And when they left the ranch, he told the girls, he said, do what Watson tells you to do, because he knows the layout of the place, and leave a sign, something witchy. Well, they followed his instructions, because the victims at the Tate House suffered 102 stab wounds. Sharon Tate, who was 8.5 months pregnant, was hung while she was still alive. And I should tell you that Watson took a long rope in there because Watson and Manson both knew that the living room had high beam ceilings that you could throw a rope over and hang somebody. So that was planned from the very beginning. Susan Adkins wrote in Sharon Tate's blood on the front door, pig, the letters P-I-G. Now, this wasn't good enough for Mr. Manson. Yes.
Before we try on the case, is actually what you're doing. We should be talking about suitability
Right.
for parole. We
Yes.
know he killed the people, and we accept that
Right.
the findings of the court. So I would like you to speak to suitability, if you would, please.
I will. I'm just about finished this area, but this goes to suitability, what he did in the life crimes. That's a part of it. That's a part of your hearing, and I just don't want people to forget what he did, what he's responsible for. I'm not going blow by blow like I would in the Watson hearing and in Van Houten. I mean, I would do that blow by blow there. I'm not doing it here, but I'm telling about his direction. And on the La Biancas, he met in the bunkhouse on the ranch, and he scolded the people who were there at the Tate murder and told them that they'd been too messy, and that he was going to show them how to do it this night. And so they went. He led them on a 4-hour trip around the county of Los Angeles. At one point, even stopping at a congregational church in South Pasadena and knocking on the door, trying to find the minister so that he could kill the minister and hang the minister upside down to the cross in front of the church. Now, in the LaBianca house, he went in by himself, got the drop on Mr. and Mrs. LaBianca with a gun, tied them up, tied their hands, assured them that they were going to be okay, that it was only a robbery. He took one thing from the house when he went outside. He took Mrs. LaBianca's wallet. And the reason that he did this, because he had it later planted in what he felt was a black area, because he wanted a black person to find the wallet and to use the credit cards, Mrs. LaBianca's credit cards, so that the blacks would get blamed for these murders, and that would start the revolution. On the Shea murder, Shea was a ranch hand at Spahn Ranch and knew that Manson and the family were up to no good, but he knew that Mr. Spahn, who was 80 years old, was too old and to do anything about kicking Manson off. And so Mr. Shea conspired with a neighboring rancher to kick Manson off the ranch. That and the fact that Mr. Shea, who was white, was married to a black woman, and Manson just couldn't understand that. For those two reasons, he decided to take care of Mr. Shea. Now, 6 of the 9 victims who were murdered in the supposed sanctity of their own homes, and 7 were complete strangers. Now, what has Mr. Manson learned in the almost 23 years that he has been in prison for these murders? I thought Mr. Brown really hit the nail on the head here. In my estimation, Mr. Manson has learned nothing other than physically aging, and Mr. Manson's going to be 58 this year. Mr. Manson is exactly the same person he was when he was arrested at Barker Ranch in Death Valley on October 12, 1969. He has no respect for authority. He has no respect for society or desire to be part of it. And he has no remorse for directing the murder of any of these 9 victims. His adjustment in prison has been horrible. His record is replete with assaulting prison guards and staff, including punching them, spitting in their face, throwing hot coffee. And I thought that Mr. Manson's talk here about spitting on the guard, you would think, listening to him, that this was some man that he spit on. It was a woman that he spit in her face. Mr. Manson doesn't like women. I think that's pretty clear. His record's also replete with threatening staff and guards, either that he's going to kill him or he's going to have somebody else kill him. His record also has in it possession of contraband. He had LSD in his cell in Vacaville and tried to smuggle in a hacksaw blade when he was transferred to San Quentin. And he was caught with escape plans when he was in Vacaville. Now, Mr. Brown said that he had 60 CDC 115s. I counted 57, but that's pretty close. But one of the important things is that he has 9 since his last hearing. And at the last hearing, the board directed him that one of the things they wanted to see him do was to be disciplinary free. And yet, what has he done? He's picked up 9 CDC 115s, the same type of violations that he's had since he's been in prison. He hasn't changed one iota. What else has he done? He refused to cooperate with the scheduled psychological evaluation, and he refused to appear at his 1982 and 89 parole hearing. I think that we have to face the fact that based on Mr. Manson's words and actions, that he's really not serious about being paroled. In 1981, he said that he did want to be paroled, but since he hated people, he wanted to be paroled to Death Valley so that he could live with his friends, the spiders and the snakes, or in the alternative, be paroled to space. Here, this time, he told Correctional Counselor Montero, yes, sure.
Tape number 3. This is tape number 3 in the hearing for Charles Manson, 4/21/92, California State Prison, Hartford. Proceed.
This year in the board report, he told Correctional Counselor Montero, and I'd like to say about that this board report by Correctional Counselor Montero, this is the 44th parole hearing I've been to for Manson and Watson, Adkins, Van Houten, and Krenwinkel, and this is the best board report I've ever read. This is a crackerjack board report. Anyway, he told Correctional Counselor Montero that, quote, he has no plans for the future, that he was not interested in paroling, and that he would be lost in our society. Well, I can tell Mr. Manson that our society feels the same way about him. We don't want him back. The board has received over the years over 352,000 cards, letters, petitions signed by individuals, all directed and sent to the board in Sacramento, asking you members of the board not to parole Mr. Manson or the other 4 defendants convicted of the Tate LaBianca murders. Charles Manson told his followers that Adolf Hitler was his hero, and he tried to emulate him. We can see even today he still has a swastika on his forehead. Can we ever risk setting a man like Charles Manson free in society, a man who, in essence, tried to destroy our society? I think not. I would respectfully ask the board to find Mr. Manson unsuitable for parole and to give him the maximum 5-year denial. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Manson, would you speak to your suitability for parole, please?
Is there any way that we could take a recess where I could use the restroom?
Certainly. We'll recess at this time. The time is now 7 hours.
Well, Charles Manson being taken away for a brief recess to the men's room, apparently in chains, and the gentleman behind him standing very close to him with a baton and flak jacket on. And we have certainly seen Edward Hammack. Quite a display from Mr. Manson today. Have you ever seen anything quite like it? You sat for 8 years on a parole board. Ever seen anybody conduct themselves in a hearing like this?
Never have. Charles Manson is obviously very well schooled in parole hearings. Everybody in the Manson group, as Mr. Cage has indicated, has had ample opportunity to appear for parole. In most jurisdictions, they don't get that kind of an opportunity. But even if they did, it seems to me that there's something about this Charles Manson that makes him stand out. He claims he's uneducated. He may not have formal education, but evidently, either before or during his prison stay, he's had an opportunity to crowd some things into his head. But there certainly is an indication that his thinking is a little bit unusual. And although he says some things that make a lot of sense, he's critical of the system. Some of his criticisms are made by others who are quite rational and quite well respected, professionals and so on. Nevertheless, there's something unnerving about his criticisms when one considers he and his crimes. And it makes us uncomfortable that he can be so articulate about real problems and be so apparently dangerous. You know, Mr. K, I think, overdid it a little bit in going through the murders again. I don't think this panel of parole commissioners needs to be reminded. The hearing started out with them going over the murders themselves. So they know what they're all about. They know they're ghastly and heinous and so on. But I think Mr. K
Yeah.
was on target in demonstrating that there was nothing that came through from Mr. Manson that suggested that release at this suitability, not even release, suitability was established.
Well, watching him, you're struck by several things. First of all, he doesn't very often answer the question directly that's posed to him. He doesn't address the issues that are before him. He rambles considerably, goes off on tangents and tirades to some extent. He has plenty of epithets and euphemisms and stories for just about everything. One psychiatrist, apparently, who evaluated him, characterized him as paranoid delusional disorder, which I suspect isn't far from the truth. I mean, we saw delusions of grandeur there. I mean, he said at one point in time, clearly not being very modest, that he knows more about the law than 15 justices, knows more about money, economy, and politics than 10 presidents, made more albums, bootlegged more albums than the Beatles. He seemed to be possessed of so many different philosophies as well. He had stories and philosophies for everything. One was, if I spit on you, you have a God-given right to spit on me. He characterized himself as God-fearing, notwithstanding the crimes he is accused and convicted of having committed. He said he was a charitable Christian who came up with the idea of being born again in 1967, and it wasn't Carter's, presumably he's talking about President Carter. Quite a sexist. He said, I don't take lip from my women, and apparently has been involved in several altercations with women. All of these things go to the issue of suitability.
Oh, yes, they do. And they don't indicate that at this point in time, Mr. Manson is suitable for the grant of serious parole consideration by the California board. Mm-hmm. And you know, we don't know what their decision is going to be until we see it. But it would seem to me that we would have heard something substantive in support of the notion of suitability for Mr. Manson during the course of the hearing. He had to be the source for that because there was no one else there to speak on his behalf. There were a few letters that were referred to by one of the parole members that were sent in on his behalf, but there didn't seem to be too many. Mm-hmm. And the number that had been sent in by people around the country that was alluded to by Mr. K would suggest that the case for suitability has not been made.
Yeah. In case you missed it in the very beginning, he was asked after these crimes were read in front of him, what is your response? What do you have to say for yourself? And he said, they did it on their own, referring to the 4 others who were convicted along with him. He said, I didn't tell them to do it. Helter Skelter was nothing more than a song and a club we created. It had nothing to do with a plan to murder people, to incite a riot. He said it was a fabrication of the district attorney, then Vincent Bugliosi, along with the assistance of Mr. K, whom we've heard from. And when given the opportunity to express remorse, there was none. He said, essentially, how can I express remorse for something I had no involvement with? It's not certainly something that this board of parole commissioners wants to hear.
Well, you know, there's something, I don't know how you react to that, but the parole commissioner who started out, Koenig, made it crystal clear that the board is bound by the fact of conviction, and they can't go beyond that. And Mr. Manson had some difficulty with that because his position at this hearing is he was not guilty. Now, Mr. K made clear what conspiracy is all about in relation to the murders that Mr. Manson was convicted of. But I think there is a problem area there because, not talking about Manson now, but just talking about an inmate who goes for a suitability hearing, if in fact he is innocent, so far as the parole panel is concerned, he's guilty because he was convicted.
Sure.
That does represent a wee bit of a problem in paroling authorities around the country. You know, so I don't think it helps Manson here because of who he is and what he's all about. But I think in terms of his presentation to this panel, he wanted to make that point that you're saying I'm guilty anyway. Sure. And if I'm not guilty, you're still going to say it, and you're going to treat me as though I did those things that I'm telling you I didn't do.
Yeah, it is a bit of a catch-22. We're keeping an eye on that parole hearing room, which is inside the state prison. You're not missing anything yet. He has not yet come back in. This is a shot of it. You can see our correspondent Peter Thorne sitting off to the left. We're only allowed one camera inside. And of course, you've been looking at the live parole hearing. The last time that Charles Manson was up for parole was back in 1989, February 8th. He waived his personal appearance at that hearing, did not show, but he has, of course, shown today. Let's resume.
Okay, we'll take okay. We reconvene the panel hearing on Charles Manson after a brief break as requested by the prisoner. All participants are present now who were present prior to the recess. The time is 15 hours. Go ahead, Mr. Manson, with your closing statement regarding suitability.
You're gonna limit me to suitability?
I'll let you ramble a little bit, but I'd like you to stick to
Is that
suitability.
what you call it, rambling?
Well, no, I didn't mean it that way. I will allow you to talk about what you would like to talk about, as long as you don't stray too far from suitability, please.
As long as I don't say anything, it's okay if I talk.
No, I'm allowing you to say. Talk.
You see 9 dead people. That's not even the tip of it. That just set one little blaze to this thing that you call Helter Skelter that you created for Rambo's movies, so all the Italians can move over from New York and move in the district attorney's office, and this Anglo-Christian girl don't seem to know which whorehouse has got the red light on it. The law, in my perspective, is a MAC, like there's a court on the inside, like an inmate court. We've always held a court in the inner sanctum of prison. Peace officers are servants to the will of everyone. The Bible, the church has a chapel, a preacher in it. We abide by the rules and regulations. It goes into the courtroom to do the same. If I abide by the rules and regulations, I can walk in harmony with God. If I don't abide by the rules and regulations, sooner or later, I have to fall short and go through a lot of changes. It's best you look into my mind now while you got a chance while I'm still here. I know a lot about law. I know the judge's bench. I know crime and school and doctors and reports, and I know bad and good and money and economy and gambling, prostitution. I see the world from the underworld up. So I go out in the desert when I get out in 54, and I see birds and I see bees and bugs and trees, and then I get locked up. And when I get back out again, all these bugs and birds and trees are gone. There's shopping malls where the lake used to be, using up all the water. And the creeks over there where the freeway is, and you can't swim there anymore. There's no more fish there, and civilization has moved out and it's choking all the life off the earth. So it's not my affair. I just got out of jail. I don't know that much about it. A couple old men I met in Mexico City, we used to deal mushrooms and talk about the planet and the earth and the balance of the earth. And all these kids come around me and I'm playing music, and they ask me, how do I know these things and where does these things come from? And I said, well, the only thing I know is what I learned in jail, man. You know, like my brother's in jail. I call him their brother. You know, my brother's like, he's God, you know, he lives in jail, you know. And that's all I know is what I've done, you know. I say, but I tell you, them, if you don't stop cutting them trees down, there's going to be nothing of you left, you know. And a lot of the kids never met anybody that told them the truth. They never had anybody that was truthful to them, you know. They never had anybody that wouldn't lie or snake on them or play old fake games. So all I did was I was honest with a bunch of kids, and they would come to me and say, we ain't got no place to stay. And I said, well, I ain't got no place to stay either. And they said, well, can we stay with you? I said, can you stay with me? They'd say, well, we want to be a family. I said, don't put no tags on my toes, man. Don't give them people nothing to identify with that they can come back and put me back in the penitentiary with. I know what conspiracy is. I got an intelligence. I'm not that stupid. I can understand that bugs communicate. I can understand that trees can hear you. I understand that there are other life forms on this planet besides myself, you know. And conspiracy, I understand the law. And a lot of the things that people have said in that court is only to suit the game that they're playing. Whether I'm suitable for this planet Earth or not probably will outlast what the court's doing for money, because my principal is not locked up in a bank, and my soul is not locked up in a government, and my life is not locked up in a penitentiary. You got my body in a cell, but That's only a day. You know, that don't count for no eternity. I'm walking in forever, man. And this little game that we're playing here on this level, there is more things that are important to you than my parole. And there's a whole lot more important to me than my parole. If you want to give me a parole, I might consider taking that and letting you live in my world. If you deny my parole, you go off in your world. Don't come back in mine. And if I can get some trees going over here in the CC camp, and I can work with these guys in the uniform, and I can work and do a job in here like I don't get paid for the job that I do in here, but if I'm honest with what I do in here, maybe the preacher will let me out in the hoe in the garden again. And I was helping the kids over there in the visitor room in Vacaville. And then people wanted to use me again and play some more politics and tell some more lies because they want to bring Bingham back from France because he's responsible for killing 6 people over there when San Quentin came down from death row and Jackson got killed. But we cover that up. We won't look at that because he's got the money to get away with things like that. So we got the juvenile running wild, and we're saying, where does the juvenile come from, and where does he get his principle from? The old winos that live in a county jail or the retired veterans that were outcast. And we dig into their hearts, and we see how real they are, and how comes they got up on a railroad train because they couldn't even get the dog in the house because she wouldn't let them do anything except what the Queen of England said. And she's fighting against Spain, and that's still going into the languages. And it's so abstract that someone has to carry insanity. Someone's got to be insane. Someone's got to be the bad guy. How can we be good guys? There's another letter in there that you didn't read about how Manson was burned up and how people threw fire on him. They should have killed him. They didn't tell you that. They tried to kill me at least 30 or 40 times, that they haven't been able to kill me because you ain't got nobody bad enough to kill me. Not unhandcuffed. No 2 or 3 of you. Because I'm right with my God, and I'm right with myself. And I didn't break the law. I didn't break God's law, and I didn't break man's law. What you're doing in the political arena with Hollywood to make your Rambo movies with my machine gun, the machine gun was a World War II relic. It would only shoot 1 bullet at a time. It wouldn't even go pop, pop, pop because it was all worn out. It was so old. But I liked it because I liked World War I, because that was my father. I didn't worship Hitler any more than I liked MacArthur. MacArthur and Truman was the same father figure to me, like the kids look up to Vietnam veterans as their father figure. So I looked up to my grandfather in the First World War and my father in the Second World War. And wherever there is a man, I am there also. In the truth, I walk with all men. I'm bad. I'm as bad as I gotta be. When it comes down, I deal. And I can deal from the bottom just as easy as I can deal from the top. And I cheat if it comes to where I need to cheat. And I steal if I need to steal. If I'm too hungry and I can't feel it any other way, I'll do whatever I can do to survive, just like I've always done. And if I have to pick up steel and roll it down and do whatever I got to do, that's what I got to do, and that's what I'll do. I seen this, and this is a reality. The air in LA Basin is dying. Where there used to be bees, the bees can't live. Where there used to be butterflies, the butterflies can't fly. I said to Blue, I said, girl, I'm going to call you Blue. I said, you see that sky? I said, that sky's dying. If we don't do something about that sky, nobody cares. If you don't care, there's going to be no life left on this planet. I said, you see that water over there? And I said, you're dumping tons of junk in that water. So you're blue for the sky and the water. And I set those people's minds, like he said. I set their minds back on the track with Jesus on a rebirth movement. I said it with a guy called Frank Costello in the Horseshoe Pits. I said it with the Pope in the Vatican. I said it with the mafia and the gangsters. I said it with every man I'd ever met in my life, all the way back to Creepy Carpus when he did the Mar Barker gang with J. Edgar Hoover in the FBI. Because wherever there's been a man walking in the underworld, from Cook County Jail in Chicago to the super chief that rides to L.A., from Leavenworth, Kansas to Big Top Section 8, the Navy down in the Coast Guard. Wherever there's one walking, I've been walking there with it.
Mr. Manson, talk about suitability, please.
I don't know what else I could be if I couldn't be suitable to be your leader. I ain't nothing.
All right.
I'm your president at least 3 times. That's through Reagan up through the mine.
Mm-hmm.
Odom was only his appointee, and he only got there because he was riding on me. That was my horse. That was my divorce court to come back with Nixon. And the only reason JR got up out of Texas because I went across Africa with 2 Mau Mau from
Mr. Manson,
in 1960.
Mr. Manson, excuse me. Would you please talk as to why you should be paroled? If you have nothing to say in that area, then we're going to recess to deliberate.
Okay.
I'm going to call on into it.
If I'm not paroled,
okay,
and I don't get a chance to get back up on top of this dream, you're going to lose all your money. Your farms ain't going to produce. You're going to win, helter skelter. You're going to win your reality. You're going to get everything that you want right from the pages of that court. That's going to be your reality, and you're coming. You're growing up, and you're going to be there just like you want him to be there. That's where he's coming because that's what you're making for yourself.
All right, we're going to recess for deliberation. We'll call you back after we make a decision. The time is now 15:25 hours. Prisoner leave, please.
I don't need those papers. Give them to me.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. We reconvene the panel hearing on Charles Manson. All participants are present who were present prior to the recess. The time is 15:45 hours. The panel reviewed all the information received and relied upon the following circumstances in concluding that the prisoner is not suitable for parole and would pose an unreasonable risk of danger to society if released at this time. Number 1, the offense was carried out in a special, heinous, atrocious, and cruel manner. The offense was carried out in a manner which exhibits a callous disregard for the life and suffering of another. Multiple victims were attacked, injured, and killed in the same and separate incidents. The victims were abused and defiled and mutilated during the offense. These conclusions are drawn from the statement of facts wherein the prisoner planned and participated in the torture, mutilation, and killing of 9 victims. 7 of the victims were strangers and selected by the prisoner at random. The murders were senseless, brutal, directed by the prisoner to satisfy his idealistic vision of a race war. The prisoner has a record of violent and assaultive behavior. He had an escalating pattern of criminal conduct and violence. He had an unstable social history. He's failed to profit from society's previous attempts to correct his criminality. These included juvenile probation, juvenile camp, CYA commitment, 3 prior prison terms, and county jail, and parole violation. Yet the unstable social history and prior criminality included beginning a criminal conduct at an early age, sent to juvenile boys' school as a juvenile involved in a burglary, stealing vehicles, convicted of the Dyer Act and sent to the National Training School in Washington, D.C. Adult convictions included GTA, forgery, theft, interfering with a peace officer, attempted escapes from prison, 3 prior prison terms, probation and parole violation, extensive involvement in drugs, and was on the federal parole at the time of the incident offense. The prisoner is programmed in a limited manner while incarcerated. He's failed to develop a marketable skill that can be put to use upon release. He's failed to upgrade educationally and vocationally as previously recommended by the board, and he's not participated to any extent has not participated in beneficial self-help and therapy programming. He's failed to demonstrate an evidence of positive change. Misconduct while incarcerated included 60 115s from 1971 to 1992, 9 115s since his last hearing, many for threatening staff. The latest was on 2/11/92, where he received 3 of a serious nature for spitting at a correctional officer, threatening staff, and resisting staff. A psychiatric report dated January of 1992, authored by Christopherson, is unfavorable. He also refused to attend a 1992 appointment for a psych evaluation. The panel makes the following finding: that the prisoner needs therapy in order to face, discuss, understand, and cope with stress in an unobstructed manner. Until progress is made, the prisoner continues to be unpredictable and a threat to others. Also, therapy, although the panel feels that therapy is needed, we question motivation and amenability. In view of the prisoner's criminal history, continued negative behavior, and lack of program participation, there is no indication that the prisoner would behave differently.
You got me locked in a hole.
Well, listen to me.
You guys get trapped up in all that illusion and you keep building it up and making it worse.
Please listen to me, Mr.
You
Manson.
got to live in it.
The prisoner, the hearing panel, according to section 3041.5C of the Penal Code, the hearing panel finds that it is not reasonable to expect the parole would be granted a hearing during the following 5 years. The specific reasons for these findings are as follows. And number one, the crime itself. The prisoner committed the offense in a especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel manner, in that he participated in the killing of 9 victims, most victims selected at random to fulfill his idealistic dream of helter-skelter. As a result, a longer period of observation and evaluation is required before the board should set a parole date. Number two, the prisoner has a prior criminal record and spent most of his life prior to the incident offense in and out of correctional facilities. Number three, a longer period of time is required to evaluate his suitability in view of the prisoner's long history of criminality and misconduct. These include 60 serious 115s, 9 since his last hearing, and 3 serious during the last year. Number four, a recent psychiatric report dated January of 1992, authored by Christopherson, indicates a need for a longer period of observation and evaluation. And number five, the prisoner has not completed necessary programming, which is essential to his adjustment and needs additional time to gain such programming. Recommendations to you, Mr. Manson: that you become disciplinary free, that you work to reduce your custody level so that program opportunities will become more available, that you upgrade when you can, upgrade vocationally and educationally, and you participate in self-help and therapy programming. This concludes the panel hearing. The time is now 15:52 hours. A prisoner may leave. Good luck to you, Mr. Manson. This is a copy of your decision.
Ed Hammock, some final thoughts as we wrap up our coverage here of this parole hearing.
Well, I think what comes to my mind is the California Board representatives seem to have been well prepared for this particular case. I mean, I guess the viewing audience would say, well, they darn well should be. But they were very well prepared. They sort of knew Charlie Manson. They knew his case. They knew his history. They went into all the areas that seemed to make some sort of sense. They gave him and us an opportunity for him to say whatever he wanted to say, and